Hello everyone, my name's Arshi Ghosh and this is my project for the Big Bang competition. For my project, I have decided to make the world from an invisible place to a visible place. And yes, I'm talking about fingerprints. I have decided to test variables that affect latent fingerprint detection. In a forensic world, there are three types of fingerprints: a latent fingerprint, a patent fingerprint, and a visible fingerprint. A latent fingerprint, which I have investigated for this project, is invisible. It is stuff that we leave behind every single day from the sweat and the oils from our thumbs. A patent fingerprint is from clothes and wood, and a visible fingerprint is from blood, dirt, and ink. In the forensic science world, for latent fingerprint testing, scientists use black magnetic powders and aluminum flakes with lifting tape. They also use alternative light source, which analyzes fingerprints on doors, doorknobs, windows, etc. This is done through a laser which emits a particular wavelength of a light. For example, blue light can be mixed with an orange filter to create a really distinct print. But today, we are not going to be going on a forensic scientist level. We are going to do experiments using simple things we find in our homes. So for my first experiment, I'm going to be testing 3 different powders on 6 different surfaces. So let's begin. For experiment 1, I decided to take 3 different powders and test them on 6 different surfaces. For the control for this experiment, I controlled the type of brush I used and the same material size. I hypothesized that the cocoa powder will be the best powder as it has a color which gives us a distinct print, and the glass will be the best surface. Here is exhibit A of my results. This shows the final look of all the prints I got, and these were the best prints I got, which was on a metal surface. This was baby powder, cocoa powder, and cornstarch. This showed that metal was the best surface. Then I accumulated my results in a table where I gave baby powder, cocoa powder, corn flour, and each type of surface a rating from 5 to 0, where 5 being the best print, 0 being the lowest print. I investigated wet paper towels in this, but I didn't include them in my results because they were 0 for all of them. I received no prints from them. And here you can see that metal spoon gained a total points of 13, and cocoa powder gained a total of 13 as well, which means that cocoa powder and metal out of these substances and surfaces were the best for latent fingerprint. But why? Cocoa powder is lipophilic, which means it is fat-loving components, like fatty acids and oils, which means that it gets stuck to our fingerprints because that's exactly what our fingerprints consist of. It is also so ground and fine that it can get into the ridges of our fingerprints and show that very clear shape, and it is dry, which means it is even more attracted to the moisture from our sweat. Baby powder. Baby powder is made of talcum, which is a compound of magnesium silicate, and the way baby powder reacts with our sweat is quite unique. The fine powder reacts with those microscopic droplets of our sweat, and the powder is only wetted on the lower side, which creates a meniscus. Then the meniscus has lower pressure inside than the outside atmospheric pressure, which creates a very tiny suction, allowing the powder to stick to our sweat, creating a very clear residue. Lastly, I use cornstarch. Cornstarch is very similar to baby powder and cocoa powder, but it is also used in non-toxic forensic science, as its non-toxicity can allow it to be used in powders which test latent fingerprinting. Lastly, the reason why metal was the best surface in my experiment, not glass like I predicted, is because metal is non-porous, which means that it doesn't absorb the sweat and the moisture. And also, ionic salts from our sweat corrode the metallic layer at the top, which leaves a permanent mark behind, no matter how hard it has been cleaned. So my conclusion to experiment A is that cocoa powder and metal are the best surfaces and powder for latent fingerprinting. For experiment 2, I'm going to test the effect of temperatures on latent fingerprinting using my results from experiment 1. I'm going to put these in now. All of them, this one had the clearest. For my second experiment, my control was that I used metal spoons and cocoa powder for each one of them, but I changed the temperature. I kept one in room temperature, one in the fridge, and one above hot water. I predicted that the cocoa powder would give the best print on the cold spoon as it could freeze and preserve the print. But here is exhibit A, and you can see the best print is actually on the control. There is barely any print on the hot, and on the cold, there is no print. The cocoa powder stuck to the whole spoon, not just my fingerprint. So this disproves my hypothesis because in hot temperatures, the sweat evaporates, which means there is no moisture left behind for us to detect. However, in my experiment, I also had some condensation, which made the cocoa powder clump on the spoon. In cold temperatures, the sweat fat freezes and it's less viscous, which allows it to not show the ridges very clearly, and it kind of just sticks to the whole spoon. It doesn't really matter where the whole fingerprint is, it kind of just adhered to the whole spoon. So to conclude investigation 2, I concluded that room temperature is the perfect temperature for latent fingerprinting. For my final investigation, I decided to investigate liquids and their effect in latent fingerprinting. I used balsamic vinegar and water, and I controlled temperature and using a metal spoon again. I believed that none of them would give a print as the liquid will slide off the spoon, and that is exactly what happened as shown in exhibit A. You can see there is no print in neither of these spoons. This is because the liquid washes off the moisture and the sweat with it, instead of leaving a print there, so it cannot detect anything. To conclude, my investigation proves that to get the best results in latent fingerprinting, you have to use room temperature, cocoa powder if you're using home ingredients, metal, and no liquid. Cocoa powder and baby powder and cornstarch actually gave very similar results on the metal spoon. However, I believe that cocoa powder had more clearer results in every single type of material than the other 2 powders, which is why I chose cocoa powder to be my best powder for latent fingerprinting. This can be also used in green forensic science. However, to harvest cocoa, a huge amount of deforestation occurs around the world. So, forensic scientists who choose to use cocoa powder for green chemistry should use cocoa that is fair trade and supports agroforestry in order to protect the environment as well as solving crime. Remember, be careful. Something that can bake a delicious cake can also detect your fingerprints. Thank you for watching. Bye!